Have you ever stopped to think about what happens when the experts, well, when they get it wrong? When an authority you totally trust gives you some bad advice and you go ahead and act on it. It feels like a very modern problem, but it turns out it's an ancient one too. So let's dive into this really fascinating logical puzzle from the Talmud that tackles this exact issue. And this is the big question, right? Who's on the hook? Is it you for following the advice? Or is it the authority that gave you the bad information in the first place? As we're about to see, the answer isn't as simple as you might think. It gets surprisingly complex, and it all hinges on some very, very fine details.
Okay, so first things first, we need a baseline. What's the fundamental rule here? For that, we turn to an ancient legal text called the Mishnah, and it introduces this core idea called the rule of reliance.
So the Mishnah lays out two really clear scenarios. On one side, you've got your everyday person. If they follow a mistaken ruling from the high court, they're totally exempt from liability. Why? Because, and this is key, they associated their action with the court. They put their trust in the system. But on the other side, you have the expert, say a judge or a scholar who's deep in this stuff. If that person knows the court messed up but follows the ruling anyway, they are liable. They can't hide behind the court's mistake because they should have known better. Their action is associated with their own judgment.
So, it all boils down to this, the principle of reliance. Your action is basically tied to the authority you're leaning on. If you're a layperson, you're relying on the court, so you're covered. But if you're an expert, your ultimate authority is your own knowledge, so the responsibility lands squarely on your shoulders. Seems simple enough, right? Well, not so fast.
Because this is where a huge, and I mean huge, debate just erupts. It turns out that a ruling isn't always just a ruling. In fact, whether you're liable or not can literally come down to the precise words the court decides to use.
And this, my friends, is where the plot really thickens. The ancient sages realized that the specific language of a legal decision carries massive weight. Like, is the court just having a theoretical chat about the law? Or are they actually giving you a green light, a direct order to go and do something?
So, let's meet our first contender, a sage named Shmuel. His opinion is pretty straightforward. He argues that if the court simply declares it is permitted for you, that's it. That's a full-on, actionable ruling. It's clear, it's direct, and it's enough to make the court responsible if they got it wrong.
But then another sage, Rav Dimi, comes in and says, hold on a second. He argues that's not nearly enough. For a statement to be a real ruling that someone can act on, the court has to be way more explicit. They have to say, it is permitted for you to perform this action. See the difference? Without that explicit instruction, Rav Dimi says it could just be a theoretical point of law, not a practical command to go do something. And that's really the heart of the whole debate. Why on earth would a couple of extra words, to perform this action, be the deciding factor? It seems like such a tiny, nitpicky detail, but in law, as you know, the tiny details can change absolutely everything. So, the Talmud does what it does best. It starts digging for evidence.
So how do you prove a point like this? Well, you build a case piece by piece. And the Talmud presents three key pieces of evidence to argue that Rav Dimi's stricter view, the one that needs those extra words, is the correct one.
The argument unfolds like a legal drama in three parts. They're going to look at a case about a rebellious judge, then a case about a woman who is permitted to remarry, and finally they're going to circle all the way back to the exact wording of the exact Mishnah we started with.
The logic goes like this. First, in the case of a rebellious elder, he only gets into trouble if he specifically, quote, instructed others to act against the high court. Just teaching a different opinion wasn't enough. He had to tell them to do something. Second, in the case of the remarried woman, the court permitted her to marry, a very specific action. And finally, if you look closely at our own Mishnah, it says the court ruled to violate a commandment, which clearly implies an action, not just a theoretical permission.
So, after lining up all the evidence, the conclusion seems pretty airtight. All three proofs point in the exact same direction. Rav Dimi was right. A valid, binding ruling has to include a specific instruction to act. The case looks closed.
But just when you think you've got it all figured out, the Talmud pulls the rug right out from under you. You have to get ready for a complete 180-degree reversal.
This is one of my favorite moves in Talmudic reasoning. An alternate tradition is brought in, and in this version, the opinions we just spent all this time proving are completely flipped on their head.
Just look at this. In this alternate version, it's now Shmuel who holds the stricter view, the one requiring an instruction to act. And it's Rav Dimi who says a simple "it is permitted" is plenty. Everything we just thought we proved is suddenly thrown right back up in the air.
And here is the absolute genius of this method. The text now takes the exact same three pieces of evidence, the elder, the woman, and the Mishnah, and uses them as challenges against this new version of the opinions. The argument becomes, hey Rav Dimi, how can you possibly say a simple "it is permitted" is enough, when all our textual evidence clearly points to the need for a specific instruction to act? It's like an incredible intellectual stress test of the entire logical framework.
So who was right, Shmuel or Rav Dimi? Well, the text actually leaves the debate unresolved, and that, it turns out, brings us to the real takeaway of this whole fascinating exercise.
See, the crucial point here isn't about getting to a simple final answer. It's about appreciating the incredible rigor of the thought process itself. It's about understanding the depth, the precision, and the care that's required to make a responsible judgment.
And this is what we're really left with. We see the profound, almost unbelievable importance placed on every single word. We understand that there's a world of difference between a theoretical idea and a practical command. And maybe most importantly, we see the enormous responsibility that rests on any authority to communicate its decisions with absolute, unambiguous clarity.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought. If these ancient sages analyze language with this much intensity, what does that say about our own responsibility? In our world of instant communication, texts, and social media, maybe it's worth asking ourselves, does every word we use carry the weight of a ruling we might one day be held accountable for?